Today is April 14th, 2023, and this is episode 39 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. Technically, our first episode of Season 3. I'm your host, Sean Vowles, and today I'm joined by Joe Mead. Today, Joe, we got a couple things to go over, a lot of transfer portal madness, but we decided this was episode 1 of Season 3 because we're just looking forward now into next year. A lot of moving parts, but we're Big Ten guys, so we're going to start there. And Joe, your guys at Michigan have probably been the most active in the portal and probably need the most from the portal. So give us a little update on the Wolverines. Kind of a lot of moving pieces in the roster.
Yeah, Sean, like you said, there's so many moving pieces. It's really hard to figure out where to start. I guess we'll get with the immediate two roster spots that became available in the coming, at least in the past couple weeks. We had Jed Howard and Kobe Buffkin. Depending on what mock drafts you're looking at, both could be projected lottery picks. I can tell you from the Michigan fan base and the Michigan side, a lot were very upset to see Kobe leave, but understood it. But Jet leaving, to my surprise, was not too big a point of contention for the Michigan fans. They were not too upset, particularly because Jet at the end, his defense was not great, and when his scoring was not there, people thought he brought very little to the floor when he was inconsistent. So, with all that being said, we can go into that in future podcasts. That left two open spots on the roster. Isaiah Barnes also transferring, left a third. And that allowed Michigan to go after three guys that they've already gotten in the transfer portal. I think the first one we start with Sean, and I'll get your take on this too, is Caleb Love. In terms of stars of the NCAA tournament in 2022, I think Caleb Love would have to be top 2 or 3 easily, especially after his performance against Duke in the Final Four. But, Sean, Caleb Love's kind of one of those guys. I don't have to tell Carolina or ACC or just general college basketball fans that he's kind of a guy you ride or die with. He takes a lot of shots. And there was a lot of rumors about what went on in the Carolina locker room. Caleb Love was usually, if not at the center of it, definitely close to the center of it. So, a big risk for Jawad Howard. I think it was Jeff Goodman who said, this will be the transfer that makes or breaks the Jawad Howard era at Michigan. And I think he could be right because the other two guys, Namari Burnett, Trey Jackson, I think Namari will start. I think he was a guy that Michigan recruited heavily coming out of high school, but hasn't really done too much. He was a 5-star coming out of high school, but got injured at Texas Tech, tried to get another shot at Alabama, but that roster last year was just too talented. He only got some support minutes. So, definitely a lot Michigan could do in their lineup. Certainly not finalized by any means. I have my phone, and Sean has his phone on ring right now because while we're shooting, we don't know if anyone's going to commit. After Sean gives his take on Caleb Love, I'll go into who they're targeting. But Sean, what do you think about the Caleb Love acquisition?
It's a worthwhile risk. It's a big risk. He'll probably lose you a couple games next year by going 4 for 18. But you kind of need those sorts of guys, right? You lost Buffkin, you lost Howard. You need somebody that can at least show that they can do it, right? Love, I think he was like 32% from 3 or something. That's going to need to go up. But he's got to just rein in a little bit sometimes. He's a bad shot taker, and sometimes he's a bad shot maker. And Indiana played UNC this year, and the thing that I remember about Caleb Love is that he never takes easy shots. And he never did. And it wasn't a part of the UNC offense. It wasn't a part of their play style. But if you can get him good looks, he's going to be a really good player. He's capable of being a first-team All-Big Ten player. And Michigan losing a couple guys to the NBA, probably losing Hunter. You need to take the risk because the potential's there. And you mentioned the two other guys. Trey Jackson's a pretty good player, too. Seton Hall guy. Can shoot the 3 a little bit. Probably a 4 in the Big Ten. Unless the play style changes, which it won't. But he's probably a 4, he can shoot the 3, so I really like that transfer. I think people are disrespecting him a little too much. Might start for you. So, a lot of moving parts in Wolverine land right now, but I'm sure you've still got 6 or 7 guys you're looking out for. You got a couple of scholarships left. there's talent out there, and transfers can make or break. You know, the season. Michigan doesn't really have a choice. They kind of need to get a lot of transfers, sort of like Indiana. But that's the beauty of the transfer portal. You can kind of rebuild in a year if you really want to. If you hit a couple of these transfers, so we don't know how things are going to look for Michigan, but there's certainly a pathway to being a better team than this year. I think if a couple of these transfers come in and play as well as they did at their last school, or better.
Yeah, Sean, and I think two big things you said right there were Michigan is nowhere close to done. So they're targeting right now two of the heaviest targets they're going after. Actually, let's say three, because what you said, the second thing you said about Hunter Dickinson, he's also in the portal and he does qualify for a transfer portal target Michigan is still going after, but we'll save him for last. So the one that he's practically on commit watch the last week is Olivia Kamoa, another guy who I hope I pronounced that right. Another guy who destroyed Duke in the tournament, except it was this year, scored 27 points against them. I believe Caleb either scored 26 or 27 in the Final Four against Duke last year. But with that said, a guy who could usually a four, maybe Michigan plays him at the three, depending on who else they get, but we don't know that quite certainly yet. So the rumor is he's really high on Michigan, and he could qualify as a grad transfer with Michigan's transfer credits. I don't have to go into another rant about what happened with Terrence Shannon last year. With all that said, if he clears admissions and he's a graduate transfer, he's very likely to commit to Michigan. So I'm not going to speak too soon before he does commit. One other guy they're targeting before we go into the Hunter Dickinson saga is Matthew Cleveland. He's a guy at Florida State, was a high 4 or 5-star, depending on what recruiting site you look at out of high school. And he's often said, especially in 2021, you could look it up on Twitter, if he didn't go to Florida State, he was really close to committing to Michigan. But Michigan, in that class, took Caleb Houston, and I think that really interfered with Cleveland signing in the same class. All that said, another guy averaged 13.8 a game at FSU, drastically improved his three-point percentage, went from 19% his freshman year to 35% this year, was their leading scorer, and kind of shocked a lot of people by entering the portal because he was the main guy there. And if he comes to Michigan, there's no guarantee that you're going to be the guy. In fact, there is absolutely no guarantee when Caleb Love's on your team. You're probably not going to be the main dude or the one taking the game-winning shot or game-deciding shot every night. So keep an eye on that recruitment. I think Michigan's going to do very well with him. I think the other ones in that are Auburn. I really think Michigan's competing with Auburn in that recruitment. And then, Sean, here's the main event. Here's what everyone's probably waiting for. The Hunter Dickinson saga. For all you A10 guys or Northeast guys, Phil Martelli, who's the top assistant on our staff, admitted in a podcast and in an interview the other day, he knows Hunter very well. He does not even think Hunter knows what he's doing. There's a prevailing rumor going around the Michigan Circle in Ann Arbor, where I'm at right now, that Hunter was at Chrysler yesterday in Michigan gear. I'm sure people have seen that in their tweet deck. I can confirm that there is some truth to that. He was at Chrysler wearing a Michigan shirt. What that means, I don't know. If you look at his comments section on his recent post, a lot of Caleb Love, Namari Burnett, Trey Jackson. So take with that what you will, but I'm no social media expert as some of our listeners may be. But it was interesting. Before we were recording, I was talking to Sean. There was a big rumor that Georgetown, Maryland, Kansas, Kentucky were after him. From what I hear from guys here, there's a concern that Kansas with NIL money could be a leading candidate. Maryland has another appeal. Hunter's high school coach is now an assistant on the staff of Kevin Willard. And Maryland, as Sean and I know, has not been shy in the year and a half under Kevin Willard of getting guys in the portal. So I keep an eye on those two. But there's a front at Michigan, mainly at football and hockey school, that certain people in the NIL are trying to target the money cannon, for lack of a better term, at Hunter. I think Hunter said he'd give Michigan one last pitch. I believe he's meeting with Juwan anytime Sunday to early next week when he returns from his trips to Georgetown and Maryland. But certainly wouldn't rule out a return back to Michigan. In fact, it would not in the least bit surprise me. We saw that with Kofi Coburn a year ago, 2 years ago in Illinois, where he was heavily rumored to go to Kentucky and did it. I know I threw a lot at the listeners right now, Sean, but with Michigan, I can't think of a easy way to spark notes or shorten or make it in a concise way. So certainly hit the direct messages of our accounts if you need anything clarified. But Sean, uh, of everything I threw at you, what stood out to you?
Let me go back. I think Mkamwa and Cleveland might be a one or the other. They're very similar players. I think they're both 6'9". Cleveland can really handle the ball, but I think if you get one, you probably back off the other one, if I had to guess. Maybe not, though, but that's what it seems like to me. And they're both really talented players. They would, you start putting a couple things together and you get one of those two and you get Hunter back. Caleb Love, I mean, there's a way to a good team there, but the Hunter saga is not close to being over, I don't think. He said he's going to take his visits. It is good for Michigan fans that he is not completely written it off. Like, that's one of the good things of the portal is you can rescind your status in the portal and go back to school. We've seen it a lot of times with coaches. New coach comes into town, everyone immediately goes sees where they can play, and then often a couple of them come back. But yeah, it doesn't seem like he's very close. He hasn't narrowed down his list at all. He hasn't done that. I mean, he's the most talented player or the most productive player in the transfer portal. So everybody's going to give him a look. Villanova, Kansas, and then Georgetown, Maryland, maybe. I don't think there's a front runner yet. We don't really know much about it, but he is definitely something to keep an eye on. And where he goes, that'll completely change the whatever team he's on because he's that good. Second team All-American 2 years ago and right up there again this year. I don't think he got the second team, but yeah, that's a big deal. Michigan fans are holding their breath. I still think he's probably leaving, but you do never know. And I heard someone else say this, but if you're the last one to talk to a player, I feel like you've got the best chance, and it seems like that's what Michigan is going to have with Hunter. Last one always has the best chance, so we'll see what happens, and that transfer really could move the needle for Michigan from a team that we don't know where they're at to a team that should definitely make the tournament. Sometimes it doesn't mean you will make the tournament, but yeah, I think we covered most of the Michigan stuff there, Joe. A lot. And then the other big news, or there's a ton of big news from the Big Ten, but the biggest news from the Big Ten since Caleb Love was Kel Ware transferring to Indiana from Oregon. He's a 7-footer, really a face-up four. He kind of plays the four on offense. He was a huge name out of high school, big recruit, 5-star McDonald's All-American, and he did not really get on at Oregon in his first year. The assistant coach that brought him in left, and he had his moments, but he didn't get a lot of playing time, and he only averaged 6.6 points per game. But this is one that you'll see Kel Ware or any transfer portal rankings. The ones that I did, he was 4th. You could see him up as high as 2 in some of them. Based on potential alone, it looks like that he's going to get a chance to be a starter, get 30, 32 minutes a game in Bloomington. And as an Indiana fan, you love the potential. He's a shot blocker, and his ability to shoot the three it opens up a lot of offensive opportunities. So from a opposing fan's point of view, what do you think of Kel Ware?
I think it means Indiana's not going to stray too far from their identity under Woodson. Obviously, with Trace Jackson Davis, you have to give the big dog the ball and let him eat. And Cal Ware, he has no shortage of talent. Obviously, in Oregon, we didn't see too much of it, hence probably why one of the reasons he entered the portal. But I think Indiana knows how to play this style of basketball. I think a lot of the guys on the team are going to be comfortable with it. Do I think Indiana is done? No. Do I think this will be their biggest acquisition of the offseason? I think it'd be extremely hard to top barring anything colossal going on in the next until May 1st. So the next 3 weeks, unless anything colossal happens, this might be the biggest addition Indiana will have. But Sean, I think it's really good for Indiana. It's showing, even though Ware was a transfer, that they're still attracted to 5-star level talent, which Indiana basketball is one of the strongest brands, probably the strongest brand, definitely in the Big Ten. So speaks to where Indiana's program's at. I know a lot of the fans, some, I won't say a lot, were not so happy that it ended in a round of 32 first weekend exit, but it's showing the program's still in the right direction. And I think losing Trace is not going to be easy. I think there will be a transition period in the first few games to few months of the season, November, December. But Ware has no shortage of talent, and with Woodson's acumen working with the big guys and his coaching staff, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he has him at a pretty high level. I'm not saying Trace Jackson Davis level, that'd be unfair, but certainly a lot to work with there. Not a bad project to get started on for him.
Yeah, I mean Woodson's offensive philosophy over the years has been pretty old school, kind of dump it into the two inside guys. But that's kind of what the roster called for. Woodson, an NBA guy, you got to tailor your play style around your players. Not, I mean, maybe in college you can have a system and try and get players to fit that, but that could take a while. So he always, when he came in his introductory press conference, he said he wanted to play the 4 out, 1 in. You can do that now with Ware. Ray New will come back. He's a really good player. Showed a lot of promise as a freshman. And, Galloway will be back and Xavier Johnson will be back. So there's definitely a lot of talent there for Indiana. I would say similar situation to Michigan. I think after the Ware commitment, there are 3 open scholarships in addition because, Hochefino and Trace going to the NBA, Kopp and Thompson graduating, and Bates and Geronimo into the portal. So, same as Michigan, a lot of players still being reached out to. Cleveland was contacted by IU. Not really sure if they like their chances with him, but they're really close to getting a commitment from Chris Ledlam from Harvard. He is a 6'6", kind of a bigger forward type guy who scored 18 points a game in the Ivy League. They already got Peyton Sparks from Ball State. He's probably going to be the first guy off the bench for one of the big guys. So a roster's coming together for the Hoosiers, and if they get Ledlam, they still have 2 more scholarships. So we'll see. We've seen them reach out to Dalton Eck from Northern Colorado, Nicholas Timberlake from Towson, and there's one more. Oh, Naheem Aline from UConn. So it seems like after the Ware commitment and the Sparks commitment that they're probably okay with the 3 bigs that they have now. And if one of the wings or 6'6", 6'7" guys has to slide to the 4, I think they're okay with that. So now I think it comes down to shooting. You've got your point guard, your senior leader. You've got a freshman coming in behind him who will be his backup. So I think we're looking at 2s and 3s the rest of the way for Indiana. And a couple of criticisms of Ware is his effort isn't really there, but he probably knew pretty early on in the season that he didn't want to stay. And when you've kind of already given up when a team's kind of given up on you, they took a lot of his playing time away. It's hard to kind of give it back. So he knows that he was probably leaving halfway through the season, and that clearly affected his play. But Woodson has never had any issues with effort, and he's turned a lot of pretty poor defenders into average ones or even above average. So, not saying Ware's a below average defender because he's. Oh, Kumar's watching. There you go. Shout out, Mike. But Ware, good shot blocker, needs a little bit of a motor boost, but people are saying that about Trace too. So, that's where we're at with Indiana. A lot of moving pieces, and I'm sure we'll have more updates. And next place we're going to, Joe, is Ohio State. They got Jamison Battle from Minnesota, just 1 year of eligibility. The 6'7" forward is pretty, was a pretty good player on a bad team. I'm not super surprised he stayed in the conference, but in a new system, I think he can really be a good player. They do lose Sensabaugh to the NBA draft, but I don't think there's many other moving pieces in Columbus, if I'm not mistaken. But your thoughts on Battle and Ohio State?
Yeah, Sean, I think after the Big Ten tournament, we had a really positive view on them. And especially we knew they were going to lose Bryce, but keeping Akpara, Thornton, and they're most likely to keep Likely, not to make that such a tongue twister there. So a solid nucleus to build around. You're adding Battle to it, certainly only for a year, but I think getting any veteran guy who could score over 12 a night in the Big Ten is not a bad thing. And I think you're right, Sean. I think Chris Holtman as an offensive coach, even this year when they struggled, was not, how do I put this? Obviously, offense has never been their issue. It'll be the defense next year that they got to figure out. But in certain games, I don't know how to say this any other way. Your best defense is a good offense. Ohio State in the past under Chris Holtman has relied on just making a lot of shots and getting back. This year, that certainly did not happen. I think next year it'll be a team that is very. It'll be a team that just knows. This year, I think it was about getting their feet wet. Now they fully know what it takes to win in the Big Ten. I think their performance at the end of the year, especially the freshmen in that tournament, was that next year they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. Am I going to say they're going to win the conference? I would not go that far, but I do think it's a team that could certainly get back into the NCAA tournament, and a team, more importantly, that is going to score a lot. Chris Holtman on offense, I've just reiterated it a million times, but I cannot tell Ohio State fans more. I think you got to believe in him. I think this year was a bad year, but he's done everything he can. Still another great recruiting class coming in for 2023. Ohio State's a very solid program. Chris Holtman's a guy. I think a lot of programs, I think Notre Dame or Shrewsbury went off the way he did in March. I really believe he was top 2 or 3 on their list. So, you know, Ohio State, uh, I still think there's some work to do. I think they could get a few more bigger bodies in the lineup. That was a criticism of them last year. I certainly they'll have one guy in 2023's recruiting class to fill that hole, but I think Chris Holtman has probably learned his lesson that you can't just rely solely on freshmen. Otherwise, you may go under 500. So I think they get 1 or 2 more pieces in the portal. I don't think they're at the level of recruiting the portal that Indiana and Michigan are, but certainly maybe the third team you should keep your eye on in terms of behind Michigan and Indiana for guys in the portal. Holtman's not been shy about them in the past. So. Sean, what else do you have on Ohio State?
Yeah, I'm going to tend to lean towards the last year was kind of a fluke for Ohio State in the bad way. Holtman's made the tournament every other year he's been there. So, early on, the pressure will be on, but Suing has graduated, and I think Key is also gone. But those are the only 2 changes. So, and Battle's not going to have to do as much offensively there as he did at Michigan, which is why his numbers weren't so great because he kind of had to take a lot of shots. But so yeah, if you're looking at the 31% for Jamison Battle, I would think that it's probably going to seem like a little better than that, just because he was kind of the primary offensive option at Minnesota, other than Dawson Garcia. So not super surprised to see him stay in the conference, but I think he can really help that team, and I think. With a Holtman offense, he's got a chance to be really good. So Zedke actually has 2 more years of eligibility here. We'll see what happens with him. He had a tough year with a lot of never really healed from that shoulder injury. So we'll see if he comes back or not. But I'm on the boat of Ohio State is still a good team and a good program with a good coach, and I think they should probably get back to the tournament this year. They have another year like last year. Well, then maybe you can start talking about the trajectory of the program and stuff like that. But we'll do one more team that got a transfer, Joe, and then we'll go into a team that got a couple of key players to return. That first team is Wisconsin, and they got St. John's transfer A.J. Storr. Not a whole lot of other movement there. Not a whole lot of other movement in the portal from what I can tell for Wisconsin.
They got the Wyoming guy, Noah Reynolds.
Okay, yeah, Noah Reynolds. Yeah. And I don't think any of their guys are graduating right? Wall and Crowell are
Well,
back.
Wall's back for a fifth year. Crow,
I think
I
Crowell's a
don't
year
know.
younger. It
Yeah,
says here he's a junior. He was a junior this year. Yes, so their
yeah.
roster should
So
look pretty similar. And you could say whether you like that or not for them, but you had a couple transfers. You had a guard who was solid at St. John's. Didn't get a whole lot of playing time, but was pretty solid. So your thoughts on Wisconsin or this transfer and then Wisconsin as a whole?
yeah, I think adding Store and Reynolds addresses somewhat of a scoring need. Certainly, if you've listened to our podcast or watched any game of Wisconsin basketball, that team, and I think their swan song at the NIT perfectly described them this year. It was a team that was not bad at all, Sean. They were, I think, pretty solid in the conference. They always, when they lost, they wouldn't really lose by a lot. Kind of reminds me of my own team. But with that said, they'd go 7 to 8 minute stretches without getting a field goal or without scoring, period, which to me is shocking. They have talent on the roster. Greg Gard has proven to be a solid coach. I think a good coach, but if you're really gonna, get on top of the guy, you'd have to at least acknowledge he's solid. So I think it's really good for Wisconsin adding these two pieces, Reynolds especially, because that guy could score. And you got a solid core of Hepburn, Sejan, Klesmit. I think Klesmit's a great defender. That's something they can also build off. If he improves his scoring, maybe he could be a dark horse guy on their team that elevates them to competing for conference titles like they have been for most of Greg Gard's tenure. I think they do certainly lose Jordan Davis to the transfer portal. He was a great 3-point shooter and guy off the bench, but besides Davis, that's been the other issue of Wisconsin of late. They had just lack of depth. So I think just adding two guys that have proven they could play, or even give solid 4 or 5 minute stretches, which is I think Store and Reynolds could certainly do that. I think they might have an embarrassment of riches in terms of who to not play and who to start with all that. So whether it's maybe they put a siege on the bench for a game, you don't know, but I think if Klesman has to end up coming off the bench or Reynolds or Store, there are certainly worse options. And as a Wisconsin fan, you probably understand what I'm talking about. In terms of where you only get 2 points, 2 points a game on certain nights for your bench. So I think it's really good for Wisconsin. I'm not in love with the individual transfers, but them as a collective with the guys they're keeping. I think Wisconsin could, you know what? Maybe they're a sleeper candidate to win the conference. We'll go into that at the end of our segment, but they return a lot of veterans. And Wisconsin, when they have a lot of veterans, Sean, as you know, they're one of the toughest teams to play at the Kohl Center. They didn't defend their home court the way they normally did this year,
Yeah, they
but
have five
certainly
or
with all
six
the
losses at home, which was pretty odd.
yeah, yeah, but certainly with this amount of returners, I'd be shocked if they lost more than 1 or 2 games at home in the conference. So
Yeah, it's going to be a very typical Wisconsin team next year. Probably not that different than this year in the good ways and some of the bad ways too. I think Wall was injured and didn't really have the season that he was looking for, so maybe he bounces back. Crowell had an amazing NIT, dropped 30 on Liberty, I think, in the NIT. I had it and then I lost it, but yeah, they were. But their offensive limitations will be how far they go. They didn't score for 9 minutes in the Final Four of that NIT, like you said. But Storr is a guy that I think can really, really elevate this program. He's a bigger guard. He's more athletic. He's 6'6". And in his freshman year at St. John's, he played 20 minutes a game. He was 40% from three and averaged 8.5 points. So you get those minutes up into the high 20s or 30s, and you're looking at a 12, 13-point game scorer. And they don't really have someone who can do that. We saw East Season have a lot of good games, but those were mostly threes and really tough shots. So I think Storr, isn't going to solve all of the offensive issues, but I think he really could be, at least not like a Johnny Davis, but somebody that can just score. Like, you haven't scored for a couple minutes, all right, give this guy the ball and let him take a shot. And I think he can do it. So, big transfer. I'm surprised that Rick didn't want to keep him in St. John's a little bit. I think he's kind of exactly what Patino would have wanted, but he's on his way to the Big Ten. We'll see if it takes a little physicality or time to adapt to the physicality of the conference. Not that the Big East isn't physical, but yeah, I think it's a good transfer. And I watched St. John's quite a bit. I don't remember him a whole lot, but he seems like a guy that really could have benefited from more minutes. Only averaged one turnover a game, so that's not an issue right now. He's 75% from the free throw line, 40% from three. So there's a lot of numbers that you like there if you're Wisconsin, especially because I don't think you have that. You have a couple guys who can hit some catch and shoots, but you don't have anybody who can get their own bucket. So that's it for the transfers coming into the conference. If we're not mistaken here, I'm sure there'll be some other teams. Illinois has got a lot of spots to fill. They've kind of only been on the outs though, with a couple guys going to the NBA and people transferring out. But one team, Joe, that has kind of separated themselves, in our opinions, as the front runner as of now, and that's the Michigan State Spartans. They get a couple guys to come back, and you really got to be liking how the offseason's gone so far if you're the Spartans.
Sean, there's no other way to say this than this is the most talented and experienced. No, not even experienced. This is the most talented Michigan State will have been since the 2017-18 team with Miles Bridges, Jared Jackson, Josh Lakeford, Cassius Winston, and McQuaid. And, in terms of veteran experience, this reminds me of the 2018-19 team, the team that famously won the Big Ten tournament, beat Duke in the Elite Eight, ultimately bowing out to Texas Tech in the Final Four. In terms of a basketball team, you're going to have everything. You're going to have veteran guards. You're going to have Tyson Walker back, AJ Hogard, who's, I think, one of the most improved players in the conference ever since he started here at Michigan. Ever since he started at Michigan State, you'll have Malik Hall back. So you have another great guy off the bench. He's not even solid off the bench. He's great off the bench. And then you look at their recruiting class. It's the third-rate recruiting class. They have Xavier Booker, the center coming in, 6'10". And Sissoko, he did get better toward the end of the year. So whether you start Booker, Sissoko, you have two really solid options right there. Then you have Jeremy Fears coming in. And the scary thing is, he's a 5-star. I don't even think that guy sees more than 10, 15 minutes toward the beginning of the year. I think Izzo, being the veteran coach he is, the most tenured coach of the Big Ten, he'll ease him into the system. And I can't think of better guys to learn under than Tyson Walker and AJ Hogard. So there's no other way to put it, man, that this is probably going to be Izzo's best team at Michigan State since that 17-18 team. And expectations are going to be sky high. And I don't want to put this kind of pressure on Michigan State or make some declarative play, but as of right now, I think this is Izzo's best chance until the end of his career to win a national title. I really think this is a team that could break the Big Ten's, has the potential to break the Big Ten's lack of national titles since 2000. So obviously we haven't played a single game yet. Summer practice hasn't even begun, or summer workouts. But this team has the makings of one that could definitely go back to the Final Four and head to Phoenix next year. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, they usually play like a very tough non-conference schedule, and that would probably be the time that you would like to see the freshmen get in there, and they probably won't because, they'll be at the Champions Classic and, Big East Big Ten Challenge, or ACC Big Ten Challenge is over, so maybe not. But they always play such a tough non-conference, especially those first couple games, that you might not see those freshmen play as much. But Booker's a high recruit. I would assume that he's probably going to be the starting 5 at the beginning of the year. And if he doesn't, I think he's probably going to go. He'll be like as impactful as Klingon was at UConn this year in terms of like him and Sissoko probably can't be on the floor at the same time. So maybe they do a 20-20 or 25-15 split, but that was probably the weak position this year for Michigan State was the 5, and they've got the top recruit or one of the top recruits in that position. So, and I do believe they'll lose Hauser. He does have another year somehow. but I do think he's going to go to the NBA. But you get Hall back, you get Walker back. Akins is. I saw that he was deciding he might be going to the NBA. But still, you've got that much talent coming back to a team that was a 7 seed and that went to the Sweet 16 and was a great game from Marquise Noel away from going to the Elite Eight. You got to like your chances with the best coach in the conference, too. So Michigan State's the favorite right now to win the conference. Not really sure they could improve their team much unless they get one of these huge transfers, but I don't really think they're looking at many. Maybe a couple players, but I think it would be tough at this point to see another team catch them in terms of off-season. Michigan State loses a couple games early, like they do sometimes. We might be back to them being like just an average team, but right now they look like the conference's best chance to win the title and the front runners off the bat to win the conference. But the next topic that we're going to go here, we're just going to go into a bigger transfer portal news right now. There's a lot of players that have been changing teams, and we've got a kind of a rotating circle of guards here. We got L.J. Cryer going from Baylor to Houston. That'll be an interconference transfer because Houston will be in the Big 12 next year. We've got Khalif Battle transferring from Temple to Arkansas. And we have Tremont Mark going from Houston to Arkansas, too. So Arkansas's got a lot of good players. Musselman has attacked the portal as good as any coach has since it started a couple years ago. And they, with a couple of talented players leaving Alabama, Arkansas looks like they might be close to, they'll be a top 10 preseason team, most likely probably the SEC favorites. And they got Trayvon Brazil back, their big guy. A couple of their other guys are going pro, but not many people have done it better in the portal than Arkansas. We've still got another couple players in the portal. Max Asmus from Oral Roberts. He's had a lot of teams reach out. People are thinking whether he'll go to Wichita State to stay with his coach or a power conference team in the Big 12. A lot of teams are looking at him there. We've got another player that I had to mind, but I forgot. We've got Alexis Yetna from Seton Hall who entered the transfer portal 3 minutes ago. So that's a big deal. A lot of players from Seton Hall in the portal. We've got Dennis Jenkins, the Iona guard, who played pretty well against UConn in the tournament. He's going to have a chance to stay in the Big East. He's following his coach to St. John's. And we've got Noah Fernandez transferring from Massachusetts to Rutgers. He's a pretty solid player in the A10. He seems like a player that is really going to fit nicely there at Rutgers. We've got Naheem Aline in the portal from Connecticut. We've got Walter Clayton Jr. going from Iona to Florida. And we've got a whole lot of players from VCU, including Ace Baldwin, transferring to Penn State in the conference. New coach Mike Rhodes is getting busy pretty quickly. And if those are all the ones that I had written down, Joe, if you want to add anything, go ahead. But a lot of good players moving, a lot of talented players moving schools.
Yeah, and what Sean wrote down a lot there. I think the biggest thing we got to keep in mind is this is still a new game. Not only new in terms of that this is going to go on until May 1st with guys entering the portal. That doesn't mean guys who are in the portal after May 1st. They might take till June or the end of June to decide. So certainly something if you're going to try to adamantly follow it. Personally, I don't recommend it because it might drive you crazy with the amount of entries into it. The other thing I would say is this is only about 2-3 years old. So no one really knows. I don't think there's anyone who's the king of the portal right now. I think it's an ever-changing game, and it's still a new game that people are going to figure out or just do away with. But you mentioned Mike Rhodes at Penn State, Sean. That's another thing we could cover for a bit. I think roster depletion on Penn State is going to be a big story of his first year. I think he's going to get more guys in there, but I think year one under him is going to be a rebuilding year. I don't think Penn State should expect anything like the year they just had, unless barring something colossal, which again I have to say with the portal because you never quite know. But what do you think, Sean?
There's a lot of players he's bringing from VCU, and they made the tournament and they lost a tough one to St. Mary's in the first round. They've got the toughness to compete in the Big Ten, or at least they've got the toughness to match the Big Ten's toughness. At least I'll say, they didn't have a lot of shooting, and obviously it's not going to be the same team. But Baldwin is a type of guard that can probably do enough to win you a couple games, and I probably have a little higher expectations than you do because VCU's got a culture of winning, and if Rhodes is coming over and he's bringing his best players, I think at least 3 or 4 so far have committed to Penn State. I know they're losing virtually everything from last year's team, so it'll be a whole different team. There'll probably be some adjustments, and I think it would be quite an accomplishment to make the NCAA tournament in year one, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they compete a lot in the conference because they were really physical, and that championship game against Dayton was a total Big Ten game from every way that you looked at it as a fan. Like, wow, like this team. This could be seen as a Big Ten team if you didn't see the names on the jerseys. But yeah, I would be patient, but also not be surprised if they make the tournament. It's going to be tough, but we've seen. It seems like a good hire, and it seems like it could translate the Big Ten, but who knows, really. But I'm just scanning the portal here. Nothing else big. We got Fardaz Imac going to Cal, and we have a couple of players going to Georgetown for Coach Cooley. But according to this, there are 1,442 players that are in the transfer portal or have already committed to their new schools. So that's roughly 3 or 4 players a team. So it is going to get crazy. There's nowhere near as much roster, I guess, uniformity as before. It's very likely that if a player isn't getting minutes, he'll leave. And if you're not a power program and you have a great player on your team, it's very likely that they'll try and transfer up too. So, every year you got to build a new roster. It's just the age of the game right now. With NIL and stuff like that. But, Joe, unless there's any other topics you want to talk about, I think we'll probably wrap it up.
Yeah, Sean, I think we covered as much as we could without having a 5-hour segment because on the transfer portal we could probably definitely do that if listeners had the time that would have allowed. But yeah, I think we would have ended the segment with early conference favorites. One thing I think we should put out there is Zach Edey is still yet to decide on what he's going to do. I would say that's the giant elephant in the room, but everyone knows Zach Edey's the giant that might decide whether the conference title returns to West Lafayette next year. So that's something that might change from the next time we record. But other than that, I would just tell our listeners you might listen to this Friday or Saturday morning, and a lot could have changed. From right now, it's 12:56 on the East Coast. By 5 o'clock on the East Coast, the landscape of college basketball, or at least the transfer portal, might have changed. So certainly an exciting time. I think people. I guess I'll get your opinion on this, Sean, too, before we end. Is a lot of people have problems with the transfer portal. Tom Izzo in the state of Michigan is probably the most vocal about it. What I will say is the offseason for college basketball is a lot more exciting for some teams. I guess it could be
It's a lot more
nerve-wracking
important.
for other teams. Important,
It
yes.
might not be
Especially this
exciting
part.
if all of your players leave, but yeah, it's certainly
Yeah,
more
normally
important.
right now, with the exception of Indiana or Purdue, a lot of writers focus their attention to football. It's amazing, at least on the 247 sites I read. Now half the articles are about basketball. Normally, once your team lost to the NIT or the tournament, it would just be football, spring ball, who's winning the QB battle, running back battle, whatever. Now it's who we get in the portal, who's leaving, what are we gonna get, what are we gonna have to do to get this guy to stay? So
Yeah, so I think we are in agreement that Michigan State is the early favorite here in the Big Ten. I would have to lean towards the Big East as being the best conference in college basketball next year. The Big 12 will look a little different. It was certainly the case this year that that was the best conference, but with BYU, UCF, and Houston coming in and losing Texas and Oklahoma, that could look a little different. So, um, you know, growing up in the Northeast, still kind of living around here, that I would think Mike and I have talked about this before, Joe, that the Big East is the conference that's in the best spot. You've got Creighton, you've got UConn, the national champions, you've got Marquette returning everybody, you've got Patino going to St. John's, you've got Villanova looking to improve, and you got Georgetown with Coach Cooley. So I think the Big East is probably looking the best for next year, but still a whole lot to move. But you agree with that conference looking the best?
Oh my God. In terms of after March, what could have happened for the Big East, I don't think it gets any better. We talked about Rick Pitino at length in one of our previous episodes. I really believe that's the biggest hire in college basketball since Calipari at '08 or some. Maybe you can find some others in between, but I really think those were the two biggest of recent time. You got Dan Hurley. Just look at the coaches you got, Sean. You got Danny Hurley, Rick Pitino, Ed Cooley at Georgetown. He seems as energetic as ever there. I think he's gonna. I don't think if it doesn't work out there, it's not gonna be for a lack of effort and enthusiasm. I'll say that much.
He can go.
Villanova. Yeah, Villanova. It's Villanova, so I'm gonna assume that they get it together again. You got Shaka Smart at Marquette. I'm gonna write an article on him later in the week that we'll talk about. Shaka certainly might criticize him a bit, but with everyone they're bringing back, Sean, I don't know how they're not going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think they just need to figure out their March problem, which we'll get into probably way later into the calendar year. But with all that rambling, I don't know what conference you could really compare with. Maybe in terms of coaching, just look at the coaches. Maybe the SEC because you got Calipari, Barnes, Beard. But other than that, you're pretty hard. It's pretty hard to match that level of excellence in terms of the guys leading those programs. So, right on the money there, Sean. I agree with you and Mike. Mike, if you're still listening.
Yeah. So, we'll try and obviously if there's any huge news when Hunter commits, we'll probably talk about it. Our off-season stuff, well, our beginning of season 3 stuff, which will be in the off-season, might look a little different. We'll probably do, once the rosters are set, we'll do a look at each team in the Big Ten and maybe some of the other big teams in the country. But I think that's all we have for you today. Thanks for listening to watching today's episode of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast, our Transfer Portal Madness episode. This episode is presented by the Sports Daily Media Network. Be sure to check out the website. Joe wrote a great article about Patino and Urban Meyer a couple days ago, and that's got a whole lot of views already, more than any other article. So congrats, Joe. But so thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next time. Be sure to check out the Instagram. We always post the link there for these YouTubes. They're always live. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.